Bermuda's future, the finance sector there, and what do you think you can do with it?
Thanks. From the perspective of where we are in Bermuda, Bermuda is an international financial center, and a lot of people do not know. They look at us from the perspective of tourism. But 95% of our foreign exchange earnings actually come from international business. And Bermuda is one of the largest centers of insurance and reinsurance in the world. And so from the perspective of being an international financial center, you have to be looking at making sure that in the future you're not going to be irrelevant as a jurisdiction. And so the opportunity of which we see in blockchain is to ensure that we can have the regulatory environment so that companies want to innovate. Our insurance companies can feel free to innovate, and other companies which may look to come to Bermuda to take advantage of our environment can look to innovate and move forward. Our insurance sector, which is, as I said, the largest provider of foreign exchange into our country, came from the fact that there were not the correct regulatory environments in other places in which to deliver insurance, and there was gaps in insurance. So we filled that gap. However, if we do not modernize our regulations, if we're not looking at what are the trends of the future, then we will become irrelevant as well. And as a leader of a country who wants to make sure there are jobs and opportunities for the people who voted for me, I have to make sure, and it's my responsibility to keep up with those regulations so that we can have companies that come to Bermuda, companies that want to set up in Bermuda. And of course, we're here in the Consensys Lounge, and I just have to give a big shout out to Consensys because they had an event in Bermuda a few months ago. Joe came down and the Consensys team came down, and there's Consensys companies that are actually in Bermuda as well. And so what we're doing is working, the strategy is working, and I sincerely hope that we'll be able to do more.
It's a really challenging area because it's in its infancy, really, this technology, and regulation is a big challenge. You've done a lot in taxation with regulatory area. Do you just like regulatory challenges, Perry? Is that what this is about?
I was having a conversation with, I think it was Don Tapscott just now when we were talking about centers of excellence, and I said Bermuda will be happy to be a regulatory center of excellence because the truth is that's what we do well. That's what we specialize in, and it's about making sure that we work with industry to craft regulations that work for industry to allow industry to be successful.
Can you see yourself working with other nations? Does it need to be at an international level?
From our perspective, we have no issue working at international level. We were actually one of the countries that were invited by the OECD. That's the actual reason I'm at the World Economic Forum, but we were invited by the OECD to be at their blockchain event that they had at their headquarters in September. We spoke about what it is that we're doing, and we welcome collaboration. So we're looking to also try to have a center of excellence in Bermuda from the regulatory perspective, dealing with the OECD. From our perspective, we want companies to headquarter in Bermuda, but it helps for companies that may be headquartered in Bermuda to be better accepted globally if there are more consistent regulations for all.
What are some of the interesting things you've seen in this field?
It's very strange for myself as the premier of the country because typically premiers don't keep portfolios. But I have, and I used to be Minister of Finance. I'm very happily no longer Minister of Finance, so I don't have to deal with all the stress and pressure that's going to come from delivering a budget next month. However, I have kept the portfolio of information technologies, the digital economy in Bermuda. And that means that a lot of the companies that are looking to set up after they've been through the screening process and spoken with people are the people who give their demonstrations to me. And I think the most fascinating one is an actual Bermuda company that is starting to hire people inside of our country, which makes it real for the people in Bermuda. And it's called BitCarbon, and they are looking to commoditize diamonds. And so they have a way where they can put diamonds in this little storage container, which has a 2,048 bits encryption NFC thing that can be stored inside of custody places, and it will allow people to actually now use their diamonds and borrow against them and use them as money and to hold them as assets. Before, of course, if you wanted to use a part of a diamond, you couldn't really cut it in half because then you would, cut its value into probably about 5% of what it was before. But now you actually can hold this type of asset and then use it. And those are the types of things that blockchain enables. And it's so amazing every single time that people come into the office who will come in and say, these are the ideas which we have, these are the plans we have, we're blown away. And the applications are endless. And I think that, you know, companies, certainly Consensys recognizes that, and others, that it's far bigger than just, you know, cryptocurrencies and all the rest. It will change the way the world works, and we want to make sure that we can play a part of that future.
So you've had an interesting experience even at last year's Davos. I feel like you're really a cheerleader for blockchain. So tell us about what happened last year at Davos for those of us that might not know.
Thanks. I would say that it was funny because I wasn't actually even, at the last minute I was going to cancel my trip, because I was not invited to the official World Economic Forum event, and it was, you know, traveling anytime that you travel when you are the leader of a country, because things don't normally work as well when you are away than when you are there. And so I have a young family, so it was just kind of like I didn't necessarily want to go, but I came. And the purpose of coming, of course, was we had just embarked on, we were about 3 months into our blockchain journey. We had set up a number of task forces that were looking at regulation, business development. So we came out here to learn more. And on the final night, we were at a global blockchain business council event, and the Minister of National Security, who then had responsibility for the digital economy, had invited people. He got very excited, and he invited people on a whim. He said, we want to build the future of the best state for blockchain or distributed technologies in Bermuda, and if you want to be a part of building this environment with us, you can get on a plane and meet us in Bermuda next week. And as we were leaving, we left on Friday, and as we were on Saturday, we started getting emails of people who were actually coming. So now all of a sudden, this came from a little bit of exuberance and telling people to come, to all of a sudden, oh, we might have to plan for this. So it was funny because we literally had to cancel what most of the people in government were doing that week, and we literally had everyone. So we had people from the Attorney General's chambers, we had people from the Ministry of Finance, we had people from financial crime, we had people everywhere at the Bermuda Monetary Authority, and they were literally whiteboarding what the future would look like. But out of there came the regulations of which we introduced, came the Digital Asset Issuance legislation that we introduced, came the Digital Asset Business Act, which licensed providers in this space, came the Digital Asset Banking act of which we did modification to our banking licenses to provide for our companies that would want to do banking and for digital assets. So we did a lot of things that came out of there. So I tell people it was the best $25,000 the government of Bermuda has ever spent.
Well, Premier, we all look forward to our invitation following this year's trip at Davos, I think. Let's move on. I actually wondered if we could focus a little bit on cryptocurrencies, actually. You made quite an astute prediction last year. Someone asked you what you thought Bitcoin would be worth a year on later. I think you were pretty close, right?
I said 4,000.
That's right. I'm going to have to get that verified somehow. Because
it is on YouTube. I'll send you the link.
Okay, good. Yes, please do. Hashtag Ethereal Davos, please.
I remember that people were tweeting me in a very bad fashion and cursing me. Now, you know, they'll now call me the sage.
You created the confidence crisis. You actually started this, that's what I think. So in terms of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, where do you stand in terms of what you think is ultimately going to be the most useful aspect of it?
Gotcha. Well, without question, we're here at the home of Ethereum, and Ethereum is an example of, as you advance when it comes to digital currencies and the type of things in which you can do. But also, I had said earlier about a Bermuda company called Hub Culture, and I have to give a shout out to Stan Solniker, founder of Ven, another, as he will say, the world's first digital currency. But from the perspective of where we are, I look at it when it comes to cryptocurrencies, blockchain in general, we're just at the very beginning. And I don't think that anyone, though I can make a prediction last year and guess and be right, we don't know what this is going to look like in 2 or 3 years. There are innovators that are building things, there are innovators that are coming up with ideas, there are innovators that are saying, look at all the different types of things of which we can do. And I think that it's only going to be up to the limits of the imagination of the entrepreneurs of the world. And as we've now seen, there's been entrepreneurs that have been able to create all types of things. Like, when the guy came into my office with his little thing with these diamonds, I just could not actually believe it. And it's these type of things which we're going to see, which is going to fundamentally change the way in which the world works.
Well, you're really ruining my next question, because I just thought, you're so good at predictions, I was going to try and eke another one out of you. How far away do you think is the widespread use of blockchain? Are we talking years? Are we talking decades?
Well, we're probably talking about a decade, I think. I mean, if you look at, and the way in which I like to put it, because people are like, oh, look, you know, Bitcoin's dropped and the crypto markets are bad and it's crypto winter and see what's all hype and it's never going to come. The example I like to say is, you know, in 1999 at the dot-com crash, you know, what happened 20 years later, where we are now, or 19 years later. The fact is that these things will happen and they'll go in cycles. But 20 years on, you cannot imagine the world without the internet. And there will come a time when you cannot imagine the world without blockchain. You will look and say, I cannot believe that we used to actually rely on third parties to verify things, and we could have used systems that verify them automatically ourselves. And so from that perspective, I think that we're probably going to be, I would say, probably a decade out.
Did the crypto crash, obviously you predicted it, but did it worry you in any way whatsoever?
No, it didn't worry me, because the way that I look at it is that, of course, there is that hype cycle, but it allows you to see the companies that are actually serious in the space. And it shakes out the ones that aren't serious, and you can actually see the ones that are serious. And so from that perspective, it's not a question of we welcome it, but it's shown us the companies that can make it through those times. And we have to remember, the companies that made it for the dot-com bust the last time around were, you know, Amazon. They're still here, and they are successful. So the strong companies will survive, and hopefully the strong companies will be the ones to lead in the future.
So one of the, I would say there have been two really noticeable topics